Hi, my name is Chris with Slick Cyber Systems. Today we're joined with the panel of Jim Slick Cyber Systems, and Steve. Steve is also a member of Slick Cyber Systems, and we're going to discuss high availability. With today's discussion, I want to touch on a couple of topics like what is high availability, and then break it down into a couple different pieces, and we'll add to it as we go along. But things like, high availability and like I said, what is it? Redundant infrastructure, data replication and backup, disaster recovery, proactive monitoring and maintenance, and scalability, and some other things. But all these different topics, I think we should go over, and we'll try and answer any questions that the group comes up together.
So high availability. We're really going to break this down into several pieces. So network high availability, right? My immediate thought for that is redundant network connections, WAN connections coming in using SD-WAN technology. You have application high availability, server infrastructure high availability. So let's start with the WAN thing. If anybody has any arguments with that.
No, go right ahead.
All right. So, if with things on the internet, cloud services, I should say, becoming more and more popular, for the modern data center,
Yeah.
and applications being hosted out there, obviously, your WAN connectivity, internet connectivity is becoming more and more important. And we all know how, well ISPs do. Well, most do fine, but then there's other types, your cable or whatever that can get pretty crazy. So that's where a technology called SD-WAN comes into play. And that's, it's actually really cool stuff, where you're actually bonding, you're not really doing a true bond, but virtually bonding two internet connections together, and it's actually fascinating technology. So the way it generally works is you have two ISP connections, right? Let's just say two cable connections, two fiber connections, a cable and a fiber connection. It really doesn't matter what you have. The one thing is, like any business connection, you have to have a static IP on each of them. So you have static IP on each, and then uh, like one of the SD services that we uh, serve to our customers from Adaptive Technologies. Phenomenal product. So they bring in CPEs. They look like little modems, and they go as soon as they go right behind the WAN modems, if you will. It plugs into there, and then you go into a set of switches, and then of course would hopefully, you don't have to, but hopefully you would have dual firewalls as well, right? So an active passive, but you don't have to. I mean, if you only have one, you only have one, so be it. Because chances of your firewall hardware going, poop to bed is far more rare than any of the other devices that are there. But bottom line is this then Adaptive, where the SD-WAN partner will give you a set of IP addresses from their stack, and you go from there. So you're not getting your IPs or using the IPs that the ISPs are giving you. You're using the amalgamated or aggregated IP addresses, the IP addresses from the aggregated connections, and that way you have one IP, and then it can traverse either pipe or both. So it really does, kind of load balance to a degree. And I'm saying that very generically, but that's just the general principle of how SD-WAN technology works, and it's fascinating. I mean, you guys have seen that, with a bunch of our customers. So I mean,
So would you say that solution falls under, the general terminology of like redundant infrastructure?
sure, absolutely. I mean, it is infrastructure because it's in your building, right? So, yes, it is infrastructure, but it's your WAN connectivity. So I think when a lot of people think the term infrastructure, they're thinking, solely thinking a rack or server or what have you. But I mean, fact of the matter is, your firewall and these devices are sitting in a rack in your infrastructure anyway. So
Yeah.
yes, it is infrastructure. Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
So anything else on like that redundant WAN or
I think
redundant hardware?
that's sufficient for that. I kind of covered all the hardware to get in the door. Once you get past the firewall, you're inside, right?
Okay.
So yeah, then let's talk. We could talk application, right? I didn't know what you wanted to bring up next, but
No,
application,
I think that's fine. I think uh, application is part of. I guess we you almost could lump that into the infrastructure portion because it's still something for the most part that or
right?
often that sits on in location versus something that's going to be another service that's outside like your internet or something. But
Right.
it's still a requirement to make it work. So yes, application is part of that infrastructure as long as it's in house.
And yeah, so apps, obviously when I think application, redundancy or resiliency, my immediate thought is right, a cluster of servers with storage. So let's well, you pick on VMware, right? So VMware ESXi, you can do it standard too, but I is usually the best. So you have a SAN, storage area network, in your building, and then you have you really, in my opinion, four servers is kind of the sweet spot, and they're all connected to with redundant connections, by the way, to that storage area network. iSCSI is the most popular, but you could use Mellanox, technology. There's whatever fiber doesn't really matter. Um, but so what happens is then you're running, VMware. So there's a virtual machine running under VMware, obviously. And if one of the servers, let's just say the server that's running on goes down with the ESXi, it will literally just and shoot its way over. They call it vMotion. It'll vMotion itself over to another server. And quite honestly, I mean, you may see a second or so blip, but that's about it, and you're still up and running. So when I think of application, or server, resiliency, redundancy, to me that's sort of the pinnacle right there. What I described, internal for infrastructure. Now you don't if you want that self-healing, self-load balancing type thing, you need um, four servers to be able to do that. But still, you can still vMotion and have all the other stuff. You have less than four, but again, four is the magic number for VMware to be able to do that. And if I'm wrong with that, somebody can correct me. But
No,
you know,
I know that is definitely one of the other topics is as long as we're talking like hardware, scalability, load balancing is definitely part of the is part of something that I know is typically asked questions about. So I think it most certainly touches on what you're talking about.
and that really I think is touching web, right? Because your load balancers are sprayers. I mean, people call them different things. They're load balancers. F5, for example, Cisco. There several people make them. F5's kind of the granddaddy.
So for anybody who doesn't know, we explain what is a load balancer.
Yeah, it's a box. It's a device that accepts and think of it as the single point, right? When you type in I don't know, xyz.com, right? And it, that DNS flips that over to an IP address. It hits the load balancer. The load balancer then behind it has servers, right? Again, we're going to use web servers behind that, multiple,
So
all
good.
running the same thing. And
So
that,
think of service, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, one of those
yeah,
something that once that you want to get to, and a lot of people are subscribed to it, but they
right.
need to get into it.
Right. And what happens is, so when you come into that, the load balancer picks your connection, right? And they call it a sticky connection. So it says, okay, well, you're going to go to server one. Now I come in and connect, and it says, all right, you're going to server two.
Mhm.
And I keep that connection with server two. You keep that connection with server one. But you can see how you can have a pile of web servers, if you will, you know, doing the identical thing, but the reality of it is you know they're getting split up, so a lot of users can get on there and effectively work without bogging down a single server because you're spraying it virtually
You're
across the whole pile of servers.
yeah, you're sharing the connections in, the connections out across multiple devices, so one doesn't get bogged down.
Right. And again, the load balancer just kind of keeps all that traffic, in its head
Managed.
and does its
Yeah.
thing. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
That simple. It's I mean, there's a lot more to it under the covers, obviously, but it's tried and true. Been around for a long, long time.
I know that, we talk about in the past a lot about data and backup. It's obviously something that's really important, but I do feel like it also touches in this topic about high availability that you know, data replication, backup, things like, disaster recovery seem like they all touch that also, and I think should be something that we discuss.
Sure. And actually, we need to carve that up in my head. That should be carved up into two different pieces. So
Agreed.
the replication piece versus the backup, right?
Hmm.
Um, so well, let's talk replication because that's that's pretty wild topic in itself, right? So we talked just a little bit ago about the having a SAN storage area network, and and then your various servers that are using that. It could be ESXi, ESX Essential. It could be Windows. Doesn't matter. Anybody, any computing device can use the SAN for storage. If you have a disaster recovery location, best place for it. You literally can set replication up real time between SAN to SAN. Now you need a like device on the other side, right?
Yeah.
And then you can do a replication. So EMC, Dell EMC, EMC was really the first one to master that, but HP does it now. It's I know I did it a long time ago for one of my customers, and we did real time replication um, from that storage area network, actually series of storage area networks down to the DR center, disaster recovery center, and it just works. I mean, heaven forbid, the building goes up in flames at 3:02 in the afternoon. You could be down there. If it's a hot site, you could be down there at 3:10 in the afternoon and fire back up and
Yeah,
run.
absolutely. Absolutely.
So yeah, that's just smart. I mean, there's a lot of other things that has to go, but
Yeah, these are all higher level, if you will,
very
discussions, and each use application is going to be different. So,
yeah.
you
This
might
is
be a little different than somebody else's.
this is millions of dollars. This is
Yeah.
not a yeah. Now, there are I've seen some applications that can take computer to computer, so single server to a single server. There are some pieces of software that do that. I've never used them. I don't know how well they work, but I know it exists. So you don't have to have the millions and millions in there of dollars, that is. But it certainly is better than nothing. Or alternatively, backup, right? So that this kind of leads me right into the backup thing. You know, you're typically backing up over the cloud, right?
Yeah.
So if you're backing up to the cloud, why not back up to an appliance first and then have the appliance go to the cloud? Wouldn't that make the most sense? Which is, by the way, what most appliance backups like.
So you have a local copy, and then your
Yeah,
your local
yeah,
copy is still backed up
right. Like
externally.
Datto, Kaseya, Barracuda, which we
There's a
sell all
couple.
the things.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's and it's beautiful. Now, that is not real-time replication, but you can set up schedules to take snapshots, you know what I mean, multiple times a day. Like we do at one of our customers, they have their ERP system I think we snap it 4 times a day during the day. So, you're not losing any more than a couple of hours worth of
And that
work.
yeah, and that methodology of taking those snapshots, ideal for a situation where it's tough to get. Some locations don't have access to great internet.
correct?
So I mean, that is real-time replication works if you have a great internet pipe. If you don't have a great internet pipe, you
Yeah,
have to take an alternate method like this where you're grabbing, or you're going to have to come in with multiple internet pipes if you can,
or
and
move.
yeah, or yeah, or move. Yeah, yeah,
Boy,
definitely.
we're leaving Steve out here. I almost feel like
He's sleeping.
you know, are you sleeping, Steve?
I am.
All right, there we go. So Steve's sleeping on this video because it's this is his favorite topic. So, but yeah, it's backup. Listen, you can't have enough copies of backup in my eyes. So I mean, if you're backing up to appliances and then that's shooting off to the cloud after that, that to me is just smart. Um, you know,
Agreed.
but better than nothing, at least back up to the cloud, using a reliable service provider, which there are a handful of bad service providers, in my opinion. I'm not going to mention any names, but
Yeah, consumer grade stuff that's not
yeah,
meant for business applications.
exactly, exactly. It's slow, it throttles you, and now you need the
And
real deal.
and some of those applications, I don't think we ever really discussed that, but some of those applications can decide to take many days or weeks to get the data that you have out externally. They
I
purposely do it. They slow it down so you can't get it all out, so you
I
can't
saw
overload them.
I saw Steve and I were actually on a job here about a year and a half ago, with an accounting firm, and they were using one of those consumer grade apps, even though they claimed it was for business. And we found out that they were throttling after the first. Steve, do you remember what that was? It was like after the first 100 gig, that they were throttling back to like 2 megabytes a second. I'm like, what?
Yes, because it failed every time.
Yeah. So the backups would fail, and the end user didn't know it. And it was sending a report because one of the jobs would finish. It was a real teeny tiny one, but the main data was failing every night. And for months, it had been
Mhm.
doing that. And when we went in and showed the business owner, they were like, yeah, they were about ready to melt. And that's what we said. Yeah,
That would have been a bad day.
yeah, well, yeah.
Is that the same business that had a problem with a pipe break this past winter?
Yes, yes, it is.
That could have been a really bad day then.
Exactly. So yeah, I talk about disaster. I
Yeah.
mean, thank God the server survived, but we already had, better backup in place
Yeah.
at that point. But yeah, I mean, and I remember seeing another one too. My gosh, this is probably 3 or 4 years ago, where somebody had a consumer grade, and I'm just trying to remember, kind of looking up, thinking, all right, brain work. Um, well, I'm not going to give the company name out anyways,
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
but they went to restore an entire folder, and it took like 4 days to restore the folder because again they were throttling, the amount of data that could come down at once. And I mean, just don't claim that you have a backup service if it stinks.
Yeah.
That's not real.
It's barely a
That's
backup.
yeah. For who, or what? So, but yeah, I mean, that is it's a good thing to have.
So I got a
Um,
question for you.
sure.
How do you leverage fault tolerance with high availability?
Fault tolerance with high availability. Ooh. Well, in relation to what?
Well, what is the difference between both of them?
Fault tolerance is having let's just say, let's pick on a server, right? So fault tolerance in a server means that I'm going to have two power supplies in case
Mhm.
one fails. I'm going to be using some form of RAID, right? A redundant array of inexpensive disks. So RAID 1 at bare minimum or higher, 5, 6, 10, blah blah blah. Um, and that gives you, if one of those drives, or in certain instances more than one drive, decides to go night night on the Serengeti, fault tolerance is that, right? So you're really running, and you're keeping the server alive. Again, we picked on the server, so they have memory mirroring. If you stick a memory goes bad, it's mirrored. It'll computer server at that point will just ignore, right? So that to me is fault tolerance. Whereas redundancy means there's more than one. So one could say, right, Steve, it in from fault tolerance and redundancy kind of, can commingle in that single server scenario, right? It's fault tolerance of drives, it's fault tolerance of, the N+1 power supply. But the reality of it is when we start to think redundancy, we're thinking that data exists in more than one
Yeah,
place.
a lot of these terminologies kind of start one, spread across another, touch each
Yeah.
other at many points.
Would you
Uh,
say that it increases your uptime?
Oh, absolutely, it increases uptime. How could it not, right? So, I mean, the fault tolerance alone increases your uptime, and quite honestly, most business customers, that's sufficient. You've got to have a pretty, in my opinion, financially, and you're the finance guy, Steve. You know this. You've got to have a pretty darn good reason for spending the extra money, to keep your data in two places at once. So you're redundant hardware, and if you really take it crazy, right, you're going to do multiple locations, etc. So it becomes a business. It's a business decision. Is Do I need that server up and running 24/7? I'm going to bleed money if I don't, or lose, a ton of business if I don't. Then obviously you should have it. Outside of that, you've got a question. What's your threshold of pain? Is it an hour, 2 hours, four
yeah,
hours, a day? I mean, what's your threshold of pain to get the system back up and running again?
no, agreed.
So,
Agreed.
but in my opinion, it's purely a business decision. They have to make the business ownership, leadership has to make that determination as to what is our threshold of pain? How long can have systems down for? And maybe a single system as opposed to the whole network, right? So
Yeah,
maybe one piece of that is like, oh yeah, I can't no more than an hour. The rest of them, all right, well,
because
4 hours,
you
8
also
hours.
don't know how many people are actually using that particular system. So if it's,
Well,
yeah,
hopefully you would
yeah.
if you're IT, you would hopefully know.
No, no, I mean, from the perspective of a user base, there might only be a handful of users that are affected with the outage.
Oh,
So
correct.
so that your financials for it might make sense to have it, or if it's lots of users and no only one or two people need to have access to it, then you don't necessarily back it off.
Right, right.
Okay.
Absolutely. And cloud goes the same way. I mean, so to kind of interject the cloud piece in here, because I know we've been talking about local infrastructure because we're trying to explain, right?
Yeah.
So your cloud servers are using storage area network SANs, right?
Yeah.
In there, and your data is there. Now the question is, they're not they're not replicating that for the most part. All right. When you do your generic AWS server,
Yeah.
Azure server, nothing is replicated. It's just a server in somebody else's network. One server, a virtual server, actually. It's not a physical. You could buy physicals. I don't know why the hell you'd want to do that, but you do a VM out there. It is literally on a single server attached to a SAN. There's some redundancy, fault tolerance, shall I use, Steve, right? There's some fault tolerance to obviously all those devices, but believe me, you're not running on world-class hardware like you think it is. There's just a ton of it, right? So they're putting these systems together, and you're getting, you're paying for vCPUs, virtual CPUs, right?
Yeah.
And virtual memory, which is typically shared with other devices. I mean, it's the whole beauty of running a virtual machine, right? You could share resources, get more servers on one physical server, and kind of cut your overall capital expenditure down.
Is
So in the
that your
case of
vertical scaling?
yes, yes, to a degree, yes. But again, now that this is your Azure and that sort of thing. So that unless you're planning on building a data center, which I don't believe any of our our targeted audience is going to be doing that. So I just want you to understand that when you put a server in the cloud, you're putting a server software onto a virtual machine, and it's running as I had stated. So and you can pay, and oh boy, you pay for the redundancy and and replication and that sort of thing, but you pay. Believe me, you
Yeah.
pay.
Yeah.
So it gets very expensive. But I'm not picking on it. If for the right type of company, it makes all the sense in the world. But to run and just do cloud for the sake of doing cloud, you better be doing a cost analysis on that first. So, and I don't want to beat that to death. That's not the purpose of it. I just brought it up to say, that even even in cloud world, right? There's some redundancy there. There's some fault tolerance there, but it is not like you're going to get real time replication around the entire world. No, it doesn't work that way. You have to
Well,
pay out.
saying that when you say you're not getting real time replication, but like a business like Amazon, we'll pick on Amazon because it's easy, right?
They're
Um,
replicated.
yeah, they're replicated, but I mean,
Sure.
you can have, let's say, if you had content that was important, like you're getting ad click revenue or something off something, you could have it through a content delivery network that's scattered across,
Sure. And that
like a
and that's
Cloudflare or something.
different. Yeah.
Yeah,
CDN.
no, I know, but I mean, it gives you that availability of
Yeah,
having,
yeah. That's more on the web, and
yeah,
you're delivering static data, right? So when the data changes, remember that change. So if you have, let's just say
oh yeah,
the web dude goes in there and makes their changes, and then it's got to replicate out to the CDN network,
yeah, and
which
and it can take a while to get
it
across. Yeah,
it can take a while. I mean, we've made changes to our own stuff, right? And we've seen the replication hit like, in less than a minute. It's just done. But
yeah,
again, I think it depends on the size of the change, how busy the network is at the time,
yep,
blah blah blah. The classic million factors that
yep.
that can cause
Agreed.
nightmares.
I think we did a good job on high availability. Does anybody else have anything else to add? Any questions? Anything like that?
I'm good. Steve, you good?
Yep. Good.
You're good. All right. Well, we kept you kind of quiet today, but you did join us in the discussion. So Steve's going to be in the discussion with us. We'll call it discussion panel a lot more, because everybody's got ideas, and I think it's good to just bring it up on the fly. I mean, it's none
Yep.
of this, guys, by the way, is scripted. So if you could tell by the way we kind of jump back and forth at times, but I think that the real sense of us, we're humans, we're sitting here and we're talking business like we would talk business in any other given moment. The cameras just happen to be on us, while we're doing this. But the reality of it is we do discuss these things, day in and day out to meet customers' needs, and that's the whole.
One other thing I think that we should talk about, Jim, that we've gone over all those other pieces, but what about monitoring and maintenance? I think that's
Oh,
something that sometimes we neglect, and even customers might not think about, but it is a key component of this. So tell me
sure. I
more.
mean, in the beginning, um, you've got to. How are you going to know your servers went down, other than your user saying, "Oh, hey, I can't access this," and then all of a sudden you get 20 phone calls, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be better if a power supply failed or a drive failed, or the system was ailing somehow?
Mhm.
And now that system could be, in a redundant system, it could be in a single server, it doesn't matter. But the monitoring of a server is huge, and even the workstations. I mean, if in my opinion, they should be, because you're not just monitoring for up, down, right, and issues like that. But it is very important to monitor for hardware faults, software faults. How about we're talking about hardware failure, but what about virus, or that kind of stuff? I mean, you should be watching those servers all the time for weird activity, unusual activity, strange activity, heuristics, if you will. So the monitoring kind of covers a very, very large piece, and you have your network devices. You should be monitoring them. Now they're more up, down, but you can see, depending on the level, they
Yeah.
call it MIB, right? Depending on the level of the SNMP trap, that the device is going to fire out to whatever software that you're running, or that we are running. Because if we're watching it for you, we set the appropriate MIB, and then we have a team 24/7 watching this stuff, and you know, gens a ticket, we can get things resolved long before that user ever makes the call and says, I can't get to my application. You know, well, that's the point to me of having proactive monitoring, like we can give with our Eagle Watch product. So makes the most sense in the world.
Okay. Okay. Anything extra on the maintenance piece?
No, I mean, I think that covers the most of it. I mean, we can do a little demo at some other point in time and carve that out separate. But I just, you know, I wanted to mention that. Actually, glad you brought it up. So, but I wanted to mention that, you know, yes, that is a critical part
Yeah.
because how you know then the system's going to go down, right? If
Yep.
nobody's watching the darn thing, you know, it's like all of a sudden, oh yeah, look at that dusty closet. You open it up and there's a server that's smoking. You can almost kind of, you know, picture that in your head, laugh in a laughing standpoint, humorous standpoint. But holy moly, I mean, we've seen some pretty wild things, guys, in our day of doing this. I know in the 35, 37, 8 years, whatever the heck it's been for me, excuse me, doing this, I've seen some pretty interesting servers that I have no idea how they were even still on, and they had red lights all over them and failed this and failed that, and they were still limping, but yeah, running terribly, which is why we were called in. But ooh, yeah, monitor, good thing.
Yep. Agreed.
Cool. Well, I mean, I think if you have questions, Chris, why don't you take the outro on this
Yep.
one instead of
No
me doing
problem.
it? Have a time.
As always, if you have any questions, please feel free to contact us. Call us 570-215-8888. You can see it on screen. You can go to our website, also on screen on any one of our little pictures here, slickcybersystems.com. Go to the contact page, fill out the information you have, email if you so choose. It's all listed on our website. Any questions you might have, or if you want to have a discussion of something that we didn't discuss, feel free to drop us a comment, call, whatever, and we'll be sure to add it to the list of things that we need to talk about.
Absolutely. Cool beans.
Okay,
Good
very
deal.
good.
Thanks everybody for
Thanks,
your
Steve.
patience and
Thanks,
watching.
Jim.
Take care, guys.
Bye.